Hello everyone, welcome to our webinar on DeepImage v2. So we're very excited to introduce version 2 to everyone. So let's just jump into it and get started. We're going to take a look. As you see, DeepImage 2 is on my screen. It doesn't look different than 1. We haven't changed anything interface-wise. We've got some new fancy icons and a little more organization there, but for those of you who already have it, the first version should be very familiar. And for those new to DeepImage, I'm just going to quickly show you how it works. I am using a beta standalone version right now, so I won't be loading my objects through 3Design, but as you know, it is a plugin for 3Design. So you can just export your objects directly into DeepImage. I'm going to just open my save scene instead, and we'll start with... so forget all of that. We'll load up our ring here, and I've loaded it without any materials. When you load it from 3Design, it'll have materials attached to it already. They're just base materials, so of course when we get into DeepImage, we will add DeepImage materials, and we'll be taking a look at the presets there with all of our new materials, etc. And for those of you new to this, that's what you would do first. We're going to grab some materials, and I'll go through these in a little more detail in a second here. And I'm just going to throw in some platinum on here. And you just drag and drop. DeepImage has live rendering, so you can actually see what's happening as you're doing things. It's all completely updated live. In V2, we now have this little progress bar that shows the actual preview rendering, so you know what it's going to look like when it's finished previewing. Let me throw some stones in here. And just like that, you can already see improvements in our materials. Okay, so your next step would be to add some environments. I'm going to just stick to a neutral environment for now. And I know it's probably a little delayed on your end, but we'll give it a second to render. You can see the new materials, the new rendering and lighting and environments, which we will be talking about as we go. Okay. So DeepImage is now available as a standalone renderer or a plugin for 3Design. You can use it with any CAD program that uses OBJs. Next, we'll take a look at our new materials for DeepImage v2. Myself and Maxime over in France spent a lot of time working on these materials, so hopefully you enjoy them. We have now organized the folders much more cleanly. Everything is in neat little folders. You don't have to dig through as many subfolders to find your materials. So over here in your index on the left, we can see we have precious metals. And all of the metals we've designed to have 7 different textures for each color of material. So you've got your platinums, rose, white, yellow, golds, and they all have different materials such as burnished, hammered, polished, satin, and a really neat texture I want to show off is the scratched metals. So the 7th one here. And we'll get in real close so you can see it's a nice subtle detail that's going to give you that more worn look on your metals instead of having everything perfectly mirror finished. You'll also notice that we could take care of your fillet issues here in the rendering. It's a nice rendering trick. All of my materials have edge smoothing in them, so you can see the prongs are a little more beat up. Not so sharp edges. So even if you can't fillet it in your CAD program or 3Design, you can do so in just the rendering, since we know we're going to finish all that up in the actual metals later anyway. So just a real quick look at some of our other materials we've set up. We also have semi-precious metals. That would be your aluminum, brass, copper, etc. And again, everything is available in those 7 different material types. So it's consistent across the board. We have pearls still. Updated those a little bit. Okay. Very happy with our new cabochons. So lots of shiny different opals and moonstones and everything you need there. Okay. Our new precious stones with varying shades of each one. So you have tons of options there, as well as in the semi-precious section where you're going to find all of your other stones. Okay. In the various section, just a real quick glance, we have new materials throughout with ceramics, fabrics, glass, lots of new materials, new leathers, marble, paint. You can see the new icons that we've chosen. Nice fun icons to show you what the materials could be used for, and so on. Okay. Back over in the environment section, we have new environments in different categories. Again, trying to organize this a little better and not having so many repetitious ones that look the same. So we have dark studios, a lot of light studios, and some neutral studios. And then this one we designed for textures, so it takes other materials really well. So let's pop that one in there. And I'm going to throw a wood texture on the background. You can see our new wood materials with bump mapping, so we get this nice realistic effect. I'll let that render out for a moment. While that's doing that, move it around just a bit. We can take a look at scene props. All of your scene props from V1 are still here. We've updated them with the new materials, and they all work with adding materials consistently now. And you can see we've added a bunch of new scene props for you. So these are presets. You can always add your own by just importing them with your objects when you import your OBJs. Okay, animations we haven't changed. Currently, they're all the same ones you had before. Again, we've cleaned it up though, so that there's not so many of the same ones being repetitious. So that is our new materials, environments, and scene props. Okay, real quick back to scene props. I will talk about that a little bit. So in the past, you could bring in your scene props. They have locators that will move your objects to match the scene. Let me flip this around here. Okay, so, but one new feature in V2 that's kind of cool, or really cool, is you can add more than one scene prop to the same scene. Right, so of course that is loading up in the same position as the other glass. So if I go over to model view, we can switch over and select. We now have a index on the right side that shows your models, makes it easier to select. You can now move things in groups or individually. So if you want to move the stones off the ring, I'm not sure why you do that, but you can. But that's great for when you're importing more than one ring for your scene. Just grab the move tool here with that other glass selected, and we can set up our scene much more freely. Okay. Real quick look at settings for your render settings. We've added a few options that you guys have requested. The default format, so you don't have to choose your PNG or JPEG or whatever format you like to use. It'll always be defaulted that, and then of course you can change it when you save your images. Your depth of field is still here, so you can get that nice photographic look with the depth of field, so your objects in the background start to blur. And you can set your resolution here as well. One more new thing is your outputs. A little complicated for now. It's a little more professional side of it. You can do different render outputs besides just your alpha channel and final color output. So that's if you're going to be doing some work in Photoshop and things like that, and you want some different layers to play with. So for now, we'll close out of that. Okay, so let me clear these scene props here. We can clear them all with this button over here, and zoom back out on my ring. And I want to talk about materials a little bit more. So we have 350 new presets for all the materials that I just showed you. But you're not limited to just those presets. You can always edit some of the colors in the original version. In the new version, you can now edit all your materials. And we're using new physical based materials. That's why you get these nice lighting and reflections and much more realistic. It behaves like real materials in the real world, so the lighting bounces and refracts and reflects like you would expect it to. I'm still in my move tool here. right click on your material that you want to edit. So you edit the material that's already in the scene, and we go to edit material. And with a new physical material, this entire color is on this material is done by the specular. So I can click on specular, and we can change the shading on that gold to anything you want. You can have green gold or blue gold, etc. So it's very, very customizable, just with one setting. Some of your materials will have multiple settings, but that's the main one you're going to use. You can add radiance, etc. And if you come up with a material you like and you want to use it for future renderings, you'll be very happy to know you can now save your materials right in your library. So I hit Save Material, and I'm going to set up a folder here for my materials. And we'll call this light rose. Okay. If I switch over to materials and look at my materials, so it doesn't always refresh very quickly, so sometimes you got to go back and forth. It should auto-generate a thumbnail, but the other cool new feature is you can replace your thumbnail with an image. So what you would do is render out a nice preview and then replace that image, so you can keep your library nice and organized. Or you can use the defaults. We should see that pop up next time I refresh the library here. Okay, so you can now save your materials. The other thing you can save or play around with now in the new version is your environments. So if you're not quite liking the HDR images that we're using for our environment, HDR is what gives the lighting in the scene, so the shading and lighting and everything. We now have this new environment palette, and we can adjust a lot of the different settings, like replacing the image. So if you want a different lighting scene, just swap that out with different HDR images. There's a ton included you can play around with, and of course you can add your own to the library as well. Okay. So without getting too into the technical details of this side of it, that's the easiest part of it. You can also now resize those images, change the way they're projected onto the models. So a lot more freedom for those who really like to go in and tweak and play around with the settings. The other cool feature is not only can we save materials, but if you come up with an environment you like, if we right click on it and save as a preset, you'll have your own presets in your library as well. Okay. One more thing in that environment palette, the same thing goes for our materials. You can edit the color by going to Edit Material, playing around with the colors. Some of our materials are image based, like this wood texture in the background. So in your environment palette, you will also find under render here your different textures that you've added, and here is the wood texture here. The wood is built with a bump map and an image, and you can swap those out, so you can also create your own wood images as well, or any other textures you can think of. Okay, so that is your new environments, as well as all the new professional features you can edit and change and save. Another of our biggest requested feature for the new version was when you're rendering things out, and I like this camera view here. I'm designing this for my website, so I want all of my rings to be in the same position with the same resolution, the same settings. We go ahead and set our resolution. Okay, line up your scene, same controls that you have in 3Design, zoom, rotate, and scale. And over here under view, we just simply say save camera snapshot. And I'll just call this webinar camera. Okay, and then as you're messing with the scene and playing around and you want to get back to that same snapshot or the same camera, you go over here to snapshots and we just click on webinar camera and your camera is saved. Okay, so very simple but awesome feature, makes things much easier when you're designing your catalogs and things like that. You want your product shots to be consistent. Okay, and that's going to bring me to batch rendering, another big requested feature. I'm very happy with this. So it requires a little setup, but once you do, it's going to make your rendering of hundreds of images much quicker and easier. So I have this ring here, and I want to show it in different materials, with different metals, different stones. We can even swap out the background if we include that in there. So we're going to go to right-click on the item, and we're going to add it to batch render. And I'm going to do the same thing with my stones, add to batch render. Okay. And if I go to the render menu and click on batch render, I should now see my materials are loaded in there. It's using just the default names that it came in with. And then I'm also going to load my camera view. And again, you can load multiple camera views in here. So again, you can set up all your renderings using this little menu, and it's going to render them based on what you've chosen and all the different configurations that you've set up. So let's set some materials in here. I want to see what it's going to look like with some platinum burnished. So we just drag them into the list. Okay, so just add all your materials. We'll do the same thing with the diamond. It won't let you actually render. The render button won't work until you've added the camera and your different items. Once you've done that though, I'm going to throw some stones in here. So some different colors. Okay, so like I said, it's going to render out each one of these in every configuration possible. So I should get a platinum with the red here and the amethyst, and then I'll get the rose gold with the red and the amethyst. So every combination that you can possibly put in there will render out. And you can also render different views at the same time. Okay, and then of course we'll hit the render button. Now we don't want to sit here and wait for each one of these to render several minutes at a time, so I've already set up a batch render for you that's ready to go. And we go into this folder here. So you can see I have all my product shots that I just clicked one button to render them all at one time with all the different configurations. So you can see the different metal types, etc., with all the different combinations of stones I added in there. Okay, so batch rendering, one of my favorite new features, and should be great for, like I said, doing a whole bunch of renders really quickly instead of having to do them one at a time. And your camera will be consistent. Okay, couple of other little features in here. We can now hide elements individually. So if you want to make sure this is selectable here. I may have locked it up, but yeah, I saved the camera view, so that one's stuck. Let's just go back to another scene here. We'll show you with the cutters. I also want to show you a feature in there. Okay, so this ring, you can see I've included some stone cutters in here, and as you may know, cutting those out of the actual metal for a production piece is usually not a good idea. Some setters don't want you to pre-notch your stones. But then you have to set up a whole nother file with all of it cut out for the rendering, because these stones look much better if there's not metal intersecting into them. So we can now just import your cutters in and not have to actually Boolean them. If I right click on it, I'm going to hide it just temporarily, and this is where I can show you that you can now hide individual elements. Every object is separate now. We'll add our materials in here. Okay, and I still have those grouped because that's the way I set them up when I exported it. And we'll throw some metal on here. Let's go with some rose gold with I like this satin finish, looks really nice. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and throw in environment. Let's go a little brighter. Okay, so So we set up our scene as normal. Let me unhide those cutters. If I flip over to, actually I don't even have to flip over to model view. If I right click and do unhide elements, that'll unhide everything. And now we can see my cutters. So my cutters are just here for that rendering trick. We're going to right click on that cutter and we're going to make it a cutter. So this is actually a Boolean operation in the render itself. It's not actually cutting your object like you would do in your CAD program. It's just obscuring those sections from your other parts of your ring. So nice little trick that's going to make your stones pop a little more. You can see the facets and the reflections and everything much clearer without it having too much metal sticking through the corners and sides. So really good feature. I'm very happy with that. And I think that's it for this demo. Like I said, there's a lot of little changes under the hood. And oh, one more thing. I don't have it set up right now, but you can import objects as lights. So if you want to do your own custom lighting, not just using the image lighting, base lighting, you bring in a bulb-shaped object or multiple bulbs, right-click them, turn them into lights. You can adjust their radiance, etc. Set up spotlights. Really fun stuff to do some really professional renders with just a couple extra steps.